Hi everyone, this is our second part of chapter 8. I apologize for the delay, but here we are, so let's dive into it. So we stopped at understanding information and knowledge. Let's go back a few slides and have a quick refreshment. So we're talking about, why was understanding information important to the knowledge economy, the difference between information and knowledge, that we have information economy and we have knowledge economy, and how they both help in the economics of our new media. Talked about, digital goods and what are they? They have 5 characteristics. Non-rivalrous, infinitely expansible, discrete, spatial, and recombinant. And we stopped over here. So, and of course, we have talked about some key issues that involves the rise and the fall of information and knowledge economy. So another set of issues involves the rise of what we call endogenous growth. It's basically to have an internal growth. So endogenous growth theory, or the new growth economics. Now, economists from different universities like Paul Romer and Paul David have argued that technological change and economic growth need to be seen as intrinsically connected. Basically, in contrast to the conventional approach that treats technology as an exogenous variable, again, something that is internally changeable, to the growth models. An exogenous variable is something that has influence on a system, of course, obviously, such as an economy, but it originates from outside the system. It arises not from the discovery of new sources such as labor, capital, physical resources, but rather from the occasions where people take resources and rearrange them in a way that are more valuable. Romer, 1995, argues that central economic change of the past 2 decades, so we're talking since 2000, has been the shift from people, sorry, not 2000, it's 1995, so it's talking from the 80s, has been the shift from people being primarily involved in the production of physical objects, such as being in a factory or in manufacturing, to the discovery and design of ideas and new ways of doing things. David also argues that it may take up to a whole generation with a longer term economic impacts of new technologies to become apparent, not least because the nature of what needs to be measured changes as the structure of economic production and consumption changes. So look at how again the production, the changes of production from nowadays. Think about your own understanding of production and production 20 to 30 years ago, when you had to have cheap labor, you had to have a huge number of people working, and along the lines of production, we have mass production of things, versus now when you are the production and consumption are smarter and easier. Other notable critics of growth theory include Stephen Parent and Paul Krugman. Now, Krugman famously dismissed it. He said nothing about it, noting that too much of it involved making assumptions about how unmeasurable things affected other unmeasurable things. He thinks that with new media and nothing really like digital goods, nothing really is touchable. He says here it's unmeasurable. Basically, you cannot really touch it, you cannot see it. Parent notes that while growth theory helps understand why some people are rich, it hasn't able to address the central question of why everyone isn't rich. Of course, we have seen this earlier. The rich are getting richer, the poor are getting poorer, and everyone is just looking for their own, back. Now, there's a major outcomes of the past 5 decades of knowledge economy. A growing class of the super rich, also known as the 1%. This triangle that we used to draw of the and not the famous people, like rich people. So you have the rich people over here, and then you have like little bit of a middle class, and then you have the poor class, so much of them. Then you have the rich people just on this little tiny area. So the growing class of super rich, the 1%, and the vast distances between them and everyone else, between people in the middle class and then people with the lower class. Information and communication technologies are one explanation for the existence of these economic superstars, according to an influential paper by Sherwin Oswald. Whether it is inequality or information access, the internet makes many of these issues more pressing, as it is the large repository of information gathered through a network infrastructure in human history. So, with more people having access to information, but it's not the ability to turn it into living. So again, like YouTube, how many people are actually YouTubers? So you have access to this information, but how many people are able to actually make use of it? It's also been estimated that there are more than 1 billion websites, all of which may claim to provide at least some information to, interest of someone. So there is always something going on, and there's always people reading something somewhere. Now, as you guys can see, it is now possible for people to share. Let me grab the laser pointer to share the ambient or embedded knowledge that they have about the things they care about, and they are often willing or even excited to do so. I really like it, for example, when you guys understand something, or you have read something online, or you have found some news and you're excited to share it with me again, because it's just a part of the human nature. You want to share with people what you know and what you care about. The examination of what happens when people have access to what we call cognitive surplus. Cognitive surplus is basically spare time that is used effectively. That definition is found in page, let me just grab it real quick. Is in page 330. It's a term coined by Shirky to describe human mind power that is liberated when we stop doing something that has been taking up a lot of time, for example, watching TV, and then turn our attention to something else. So it's basically disposable time that you can use wisely. How many of us do we actually have this cognitive surplus? The way that we have so much time and then we use it wisely. So, in a way to share again your thoughts, your ideas. Again, think how many blogs do people write? How many YouTubers do people like? For example, in Egypt, I can think about so many people who have cooking channels, organizing channels, parenting channel, and they're actually, funny enough, they're people from surprisingly lower social and financial classes. They just have so much time after their 9 to 5 job, and they just want to share with everyone else. And of course, YouTube pays. They want to share how they make money, how they sorry, not how they make money, share, cooking tips, cleaning skills, and so on. Now, Shirky revealed the power of internet-connected hobbyists, right? A particularly telling example is a rough calculation of the number of person hours represented by Wikipedia. So in US, guys, imagine this. In US, people who checked Wikipedia were 100 million at one time, but if we want to compare it to watching television, it was 200 billion hours. So checking Wikipedia was 100 million hours, but watching television was 200 billion hours annually in the United States alone. So in fact, at the time of this estimate, American actually collectively watched 100 million hours of advertising just on a weekend. Can you guys imagine? Shirley's argument is that even if a small percentage of this was switched from television viewing to participating on the internet, it would have found profound implications. But of course, not all time is well spent, but some of it is dedicated to contributing to online discussions, updating web pages, doing research, and many other things that could actually make a substantial updating change in our information and knowledge environment. On the other hand, we have Andrew Keane. Keane, 2007, takes aim at the demise of professionalism and the inevitable, in his view, of course, dilution of quality of journalism, music, and even movies in the face of deluge of poorly conceived and executed amateur work. Carr also has an interesting book called Is Google Making Us Stupid? Now again, imagine someone who just have some cooking skills, again from life, maybe watch some cooking videos versus, a professional chef, for example. Of course, the quality of product is gonna be, different. Same thing with movies, movie production in Hollywood, or someone who studied filmmaking versus, amateur like me and you making a quick video on YouTube. So Keen actually really dislikes this. He dislikes the idea that anyone can now do anything just because they have internet and accessibility of information and knowledge, with their hand. So Carr followed this up. He discusses the challenge presented by the prevalence of poor quality, like over here, online information. You combine it with people's inability or again lack of time to sort the wheat from the chaff. So again, someone who is a mature filmmaking like me, for example, if I'm gonna go online, I don't have the knowledge to actually pick if this is a good piece of advice or not, right? So again, you're gonna pick a website to read about time management, but no, just as a random person wrote about time management, maybe versus an actual businessman or a psychologist that can help you with time management. So again, it's from both sides, from the users. I'm sorry, the producers who do produce, low quality movies or music or just websites, to the users who actually do not have the time to go through everything because they don't know which is good quality and which is bad quality. William Less also made many of the same arguments over the past 30 years in the book called Under Technology's Thump, 1990. He talks about, information society in particular. He made the point that we were not asking the most basic question of our information technologies. What did we want to bring to our societies? Should we not be expecting them to make us more knowledgeable? Of course, I'm not distracted. Should we not be better able to deploy the knowledge to address these serious issues of the day? Let's argue that when we try to extract value from these sources of information, we are met with three considerable challenges. We have misinformation, disinformation, and excess information. Excess information is when your online search turns to 100,000 results, like Google Pages, and you're not sure exactly where do I start. So these are three important terms that I please want you to take care of. Now, the embodiment of knowledge in people and practices as distinct from its capture and its storage in databases becomes more significant when considering the distinction between explicit knowledge and tacit knowledge. Now, explicit knowledge is knowledge that is codified, so that is written in some form as data. All right, it can be formally taught and learned. So for example, I am now teaching you about information and knowledge. It's something that I'm teaching you. It can be taught, could be learned, it could be transformed from one context to another. Like we have a book, we have readings, we have slides, and so on. The internet is, remarkably cost-effective means of codifying and reproducing and distributing explicit knowledge worldwide, as the internet makes explicit knowledge more available. However, this has implications, of course, for tacit knowledge. Now, on the other hand, we have tacit knowledge. Tacit knowledge is knowledge derived from direct experience, and the process through which it is acquired are often initiative, habitual, and reflexive. But best learned through practice of doing something and the trial of error, and this is associated by doing so. So, for example, like cooking, I can teach you some recipes. This is the explicit knowledge. You can look up some recipes online. You can look up for some tips and tricks to make cooking easier. But how are you going to produce an actually good quality meal? Through the tacit knowledge. So, for example, when you do go to a restaurant, is all the food is amazing. You think the chef, the first time he produced food, it as good as that? Of course not. It's just through experience and trial and error and doing it so many times, then they would be able to bring up really good quality food. Again, questions you might guys may get in your exam is something like short answer, like define explicit knowledge or define tacit knowledge, or quickly define both of them and give me a short, quick example. So again, cooking is a good example of both. Explicit knowledge, you learn the recipes. Tacit knowledge, you actually practice cooking those food and the meals. So please try to bring up some of your own examples of what could be explicit and tacit knowledge. Right? Now, by contrast to these personal form of knowledge exchange, large organizations' strengths are also their weaknesses. They are powerhouses in the production, dissemination, and use of explicit knowledge. Organizations are able to manage large amounts of information. They can preserve information over time and distribute it across long distances. Of course, now easier with the internet, but they're not well adapted to do the same things with informal and tacit knowledge. Another important issue surrounding knowledge capture and storage is found in another distinction between what we call incremental knowledge creation and radical knowledge creation. Right, again, two terms that is important for you to know. Now, incremental knowledge creation is knowledge that is embedded in organizations. Those who become part of the organizations are inducted into these embedded knowledge and gradually added into it. So, for instance, a company like Disney, they have a huge theme park that are largest single site of employers of labor in the United States. There's strong emphasis, for example, on the induction of new staff. These employers were not only trained in specific skills that are required to their jobs, but in understanding it in the Disney way. So, for example, if you did go there, I went there I think 3 years ago. The employers there speak to you, and they have specific kind of manners because they are showing things within the Disney way. Workers, therefore, bring both explicit and tacit knowledge to the performance of their roles at Disney. So, by contrast, radical knowledge creation is based on the extensive experimentation and testing and explicit recognition of the likelihood of ideas failing, meaning that you're going to do this over and over again to be able to, get the correct idea at the end of it. Right? So there is here a relationship between those four terms, which is a very important 4 terms of knowledge described by Leadbeater in this table. To be creative, a big company needs to be linked into a knowledge creating network, outside it, which gives it access to the places where counter initiative and unconventional ideas are being created. Now moving on into understanding the economy, the e-commerce and platform economy. Now, usually the use of digital technologies to affect transaction. When you buy something through Amazon, you buy a service through Uber or Uber Eats. So this is also known as electronic commerce or e-commerce. It's one of the biggest changes in our economy over the past few decades. In this section, we will look first at the commercial world of e-commerce and then turn to the broader impact of what is known as the platform economy. As you guys can see, internet-based e-commerce gains its power through developments such as the following, the development of the web, obviously, easy access to diverse range of websites using, web browsers and search engines, falling costs of personal computing, and the growing case of internet access from workplace or home, the ways in which new media technologies based on the internet allow for both one-to-many communication and direct one-to-one interaction. Electronic commerce can take a variety of forms depending on the degree of digitization. First, we have the product or service sold. Let me go zoom in. We have the product or the service that is sold, the transaction process, and the nature of the delivery agent or intermediary. So a question here is, what are some of the forms that electronic e-commerce can take, and what that depends on the digitization of it. So you have three of them: product to service, the transaction process, and the nature of the delivery agent or intermediary. So you guys can see here the product or service that is sold. You're buying something through Amazon. The transaction process, you pay through your credit card to Amazon, and then the nature of the delivery, Amazon uses Canada Post or UPS to send you your product. Of course, there are varying degrees of physical or electronic commerce and transaction. So as we mentioned, you buy, let's say you want to buy a book from Amazon. No, it's not pure e-commerce unless you're buying an ebook through the Kindle, because although there is an agent and the process are digital, the final product, which is the actual book, it is delivered through your physical transport system. But if you buy a software online or a song from Apple Music, it may be pure e-commerce. So as the product, process, and agent all exist in a digital form, such as, again, you buy a subscription of Netflix, that's a service. It's all e-commerce. It's all happening on the digital life. It all happens in a digital form. Now, of course, it's important to distinguish what we call business to business, that is the B2B, to the business to consumer electronic commerce, B2C, to which the bulk of the discussion that we're going to have to is devoted, but which is not necessarily at the core of e-commerce transaction. Both, they continue to grow rapidly, fastly. Again, e-commerce is such a growing industry nowadays. Now, it has become a commonly held view that businesses have no choice but to develop as an e-commerce strategy. Grove said that by the mid-2000s, that all companies will become internet companies, or if they're not internet companies, they're not going to be companies at all. Now, as with many aspects of our modern world, there's an extent of this digital integration. Now, an e-commerce strategy can help company to what? Two of those. Now, it takes advantage of the expansion of the available marketplace from geographically defined local markets to national and international markets. And two, to reduce the costs of creating, processing, distributing, storing, and retrieving information both within the organization and between the organizations and its clients. Those are in pages 256. Companies can also benefit from the ability to develop highly specialized businesses. So through this, they are able to target particular niche consumer groups, which, while at the same time, they enjoy a reduction of inventory and overhead costs. So for example, products can be built only when they are paid for, saving on inventory costs and the potential losses of undesirable configuration and models. So for example, when you want to buy something from Etsy that is specifically handmade for you, so you buy for it, you wait for it till it's made and it's being sold. So that Dell, the computer manufacturer, actually took this approach a few decades ago to spread, many industries and smaller industries where the consumer has a choice and is willing to wait for the delivery. So, and with ongoing development in automated production and delivery, those wait times are getting, shorter and shorter. Those customized product and service provide a competitive advantage based on the first mover status and brand loyalty. For consumers, however, the advantages of e-commerce include the ability to undertake transactions 24 hours a day, all year round. Again, if you want to buy something at 2 a.m., you can still do that. So, from any network location for a vastly increased range of products and services. People can also compare price online and find the lowest cost provider with minimal search cost. There's actually a website that is dedicated, just to compare prices. Called one of the most famous websites is called Camel. So a growing segment of the market is devoted to websites that services that provide these comparisons for consumers. And earning their income by providing links to the winner websites. Consumers also enjoy quick delivery of products and services, particularly if they're, of course, in the digitized form. And the ability to interact with other consumers in virtual communities to exchange ideas and experiences. So with sites like eBay, consumers are able to participate in virtual actions. So as you guys can see here, here we have the benefits of e-commerce. You have the benefits to organization. Of course, we have global reach, cost reduction, and describing it. So questions in the exam might come like, explain what are the benefits of e-commerce to organizations. Of course, you're not going to supply all of them. Maybe mention 3 or 4 and explain them. So you're going to be like, some of the benefits are global reach, which means blah blah blah, cost reduction, blah blah blah, efficient procurement, saves time, introduces cost, blah blah blah, and provide an example such as Amazon as an organization. Benefits to consumers, same thing. I'll ask you a question: what are the benefits of e-commerce to consumers? The availability, ubiquity, no sale tax, real-time delivery, and explain it, and again provide an example. And finally, benefits to society, enables telecommuting, more and better public service, and so on. Now, notably, the behind-the-scene action for e-commerce is constantly undergoing revolutions. Some of these changes are enabled by advanced algorithms that can predict purchasing patterns and thus have products positioned closer to the eventual purchasers even before they have decided to buy them. So similar to the data advertisements about products you just Googled. So it's again, remember you guys, when you Google something and then surprisingly you find all of the ads on Facebook, on Instagram, and so on. The rating systems too are becoming increasingly competitive. So as a result, online customer service representatives are constantly watching for poor reviews and they step in. One of the most important implications of electronic commerce for distribution has been related to the process of disintermediation and reintermediation, two very important terms for today. In the manufacturing sector, let's go see here. Now, in the manufacturing sector, this relationship between producer and consumers were traditionally mediated through supply chains that included, wholesalers, distributors, and retailers. Similar thing in the creative industries, the relationship between the creators and the consumers of content was mediated through, promotion, marketing, distributing content for final reception by consumers. Now, in both of these sectors, a large group of producers is connected to a large group of consumers through a small chain of distributors, the wholesale and the retailers, that really control and monopolize access to markets. And so the process of disintermediation provided the opportunity to break through the chokehold and allow producers and consumers access to each other directly. I think this is, this was a very quick explanation. Now, another outcome of internet transaction occurs when intermediary functions remain, but are conducted by organizations whose operations are driven by the new e-commerce marketing logics, partnerships with consumers, the permission to advertise, product and service customization, and multiple modes of communication with consumers. This process is called reintermediation. The classic example of this is Amazon, which has positioned itself between consumers and manufacturers and has removed the wholesalers, distributors, and retailers. So you'll see here electronic media, like again, Amazon, eBay, and so on. As the 21st century has settled down, it is becoming more clear that there is a whole new reality emerging, both economically and socially as a result. Broadly speaking, that is known as platform economy and platform society. And again, you will find the definition of both term in page 333. So platform economy is the extent to which the modern economy has become dependent on and is built upon platforms such as Google as a search engine, Microsoft as a software, and Amazon as sales. Platform society talks about their social relations and culture that build up within a platform economy, including new jobs such as being a social media manager, an influencer, and new forms of influence and celebrity, and new ways of entertainment such as Netflix. Media and businesses transactions and interactions are not just being transferred to an online world. This was the first layer of internet disruption, but are also being wholly hosted and enabled by large players who build entire ecosystems for interactions, conversations, and commerce that live entirely on a single service. Digitization of content has completely transformed the distribution models of the media and entertainment industries. As the availability of content is no longer constrained by distributional bottlenecks such as theaters, radio, television channels, and shelf space in bookstores and record outlets. So now again, we're the usual traditional method of distribution, especially in entertainment industry, is gone. Again, we stopped going to theater, we stopped listening to music on the radio, we don't have television channel or television cables anymore. This challenges the assumption that only media content with mass appeal is profitable, as it reveals that when a wider range of content is made more accessible through online distribution and retail, consumer tastes and preferences, for books, movies, and music, and so on, are far more diverse and niche-oriented than the media and entertainment industries have traditionally assumed. Now, with the traditional media constraints of geography and scale being eliminated, it is niche content that accounts for rapidly growing proportion of total online sales, meaning that popularity no longer has a monopoly on profitability. So again, years ago, when we only had cable television, again, what was shown on cable television? Obviously, the popular movies, the popular TV shows, the popular plays. Same thing in the cinema. What was shown because it's making profit? Something like Marvel movies. They're very popular, and they're the ones that are being shown on the cinema. I mean, what about everything else? What about indie movies? What about local movies? What about, like said here in the book, niche content? So online distribution, it actually enabled people to discover a lot more varieties than what was just spoon-fed to them or like forced showed just on TV just because we did not have any options. So, so again, this rapidly growing proportion of online sales mean that popularity, how the pop culture, again, like popular movies like Marvel, this is not a monopoly of profitability. A lot of other movies can make profit as well. We have recently seen the data, we're over here, the rise of a range of small creators like, indie game movies, self-published authors who are able to connect with an audience and sell in sufficient numbers to earn a living. These small micro businesses are also a form of market experimentation. When these small businesses achieve critical mass or identify a process in niche that can be expanded, they're often purchased by larger entities, such as Victoria's Book, which was an online retailer, that was purchased by Amazon in 2008. In the innovation and the innovator's dilemma, I want you guys to go back with your memory with the diffusion of the innovation model. The significance of both tacit knowledge and radical knowledge creation is drawn into even sharper focus when considering the changing nature of innovation or the application of new knowledge to new products, processes, and services. Dodson, let me zoom in a little bit. There we go. Dodson, Gann, and Salter refer to the fifth generation of innovation process linked to the rise of disruptive technologies. What is disruptive technology? Let me just grab the definition. Disruptive technologies are technologies or services that undermine or overwhelm the value proposition of an existing product or service, thereby hastening its demise in the market. They are often unappreciated by suppliers of existing solutions since they at first seem unrefined or unsuited. So again, something that it totally makes sense and you think, and it's cheaper and it's more convenient, but people don't like it maybe because it's new. People are unaware of its potential and so on. So disruptive technologies that undercut established products, management practice, and industry players, and the greater role that is played by both global markets and end users in the innovation process. Fifth generation innovation processes stress the link between suppliers and consumers, strategic integration through research and partnership networks, technological integration through both the fusion of different technologies, and of course the development of ICT-based toolkits that promote global collaborative knowledge networks. Sorry. Indicators of the increasing importance of innovation can be seen in shortened product development cycles, reduced product life cycles, and a greater range of products to cater to discrete market segments, and the high market to book ratios of many of the world's largest companies. So, companies like Microsoft and Apple, they possess few physical assets relative to the market valuation as measured in their share capital, since much of their wealth creation arises from product innovation. Now, one challenge of innovation comes here is what we call innovator's dilemma, or the traps that exist in following two long-standing business orthodoxies: working to your established strengths and listening to your customers. Now, the innovator's dilemma is the outcome of two factors that are common to products and services based on new technologies. The first leads to the model of technology S-curve, which is derived from, Everett Rogers. This is the S-curve. And diffusion of innovation model, as well as from Donald Normal's work on technology users and their needs and expectations. Now, technology S-curve, basically, it takes its shape for two reasons. First, from the point of view of technological innovators, early applications of the technology may possess significant bugs or faults, or the relationship between the technology and its application may remain unclear. So let me show you just a little bit. Now you have the rate of, now here's the performance of this service or product, and here's the time, and the rate of adoption. Obviously, when you're over here, let me grab the pen, when you're still in the starting area, there are gonna be faulties, there are gonna be bugs, there are gonna be some relationship between how you can use its usage and utilizing may be very unclear, so you're not sure still what's going on. Again, this is in the very beginning of the usage. So for example, the television would now be considered a mature technology. We're good with TV. But most people now have one that is good enough for their purposes. But developing mobile and wireless device from which you can access television content is still in an early development stage. Now, the second reason for the S-curve shape relates to the users and the fivefold distinction between enthusiasts. Remember those five elements? The enthusiasts, early adopters, mainstream adopters, late adopters, and then we have laggards, where the bulk of the user population tends to sit in the middle rather than at the either end of the spectrum. So where does the majority of users? Over here. This is and this is the time, a lot of time has passed. And here the performance, meaning that they have started to fix the fixing of the product and making sure it looks good, making sure it's usable, started to go. So here the laggards are over here. Basically, they have waited and they have got the best of all. They have waited until all the bugs are gone and all the faulties have been corrected, but they have also waited a long period of time. Now, the innovator's dilemma is, the risk on, one hand to providing product or service that underperforms in terms of the expectations of early adopters in the early stage of the product life cycle. So of course, there's a concern of providing a product or service that exceeds the needs of most users in the later stages of a product life cycle. So meaning that by the time it reaches the end of the life cycle, it feels like the users now, they're good with it. They have already got used to using it. So when they come to fix it or change it, now the early adopters, they're unhappy with the fixing that happened over here. So it's very confusing. This is why it's actually called innovator's dilemma. What are we going to do now? The innovator's dilemma can be the result of new products containing, again, bugs, faults, design flaws, to which early adopters are particularly likely to draw attention. So early adopters could be, technological enthusiasts who go online and be like, hey, I bought this new Apple device and guys, it's not working, right? So on one hand, the early mistakes depend on your adopters, and then your rivals or, your enemies or the competitors learn from your mistakes. And then the number two, the preferences of later adopters differ from the established product feature, because like we said, by the time you reach the expanded new device, the early adopters might not be even happy with it. So what is known as first mover advantage can become as the first mover disadvantage or second mover advantage, as competitors who subsequently enter the market learn from the first mover's mistake. Now, with a creative economy, so we noticed that in chapter 6, which we're going to go into soon, the rise of creative industries has drawn new attention to the relationship between creativity, innovation, and entrepreneurship in the new economy. While much policy attention in the 1990s were directed towards information policy, the need to develop skills and infrastructure for the ICT sector and the promotion of electronic commerce, there's now a renewed focus on creativity and the unique skills and talents of individuals. Of course, the new economy literature believes its dynamic are driven by creativity and culture. It will no doubt take many years before this sort of online, interactive, multimedia project becomes mainstream in the academic literature. But as more and more scholars find themselves locating information online, the natural inclination will be to link to it. And finally, even the key concepts and theories we use to understand interactive narrative are relatively new and still debated. There's always also attempts to identify the social potential of new forms of digital storytelling, and in particular the theories that we can rely on to better comprehend its social impact. Poetry makes the case for continued attention to the concept of mediation. Mediation, again, like we have seen in the being in between, as it was popularized as a way to better capture the complexity of the multiple, often dialectical process through which the range of practices that we gather under the term of digital storytelling. We will transform society and politics. And by this, then we have reached the end of chapter 8. Hopefully we can discuss it soon and you will find this as easy as possible.